Revenge has been used for many years as a theatrical theme in different movies and TV shows. From Arya Stark wanting revenge against the Lannisters for killing her father, to Sasuke wanting to kill his brother for slaughtering their whole clan. It is a very powerful tool that can be given to a character to explore them going to unfathomable lengths to get their get back, as the kids say. And I think the feeling of revenge is one that a lot of us have had to some degree at one point or another in our lives. Whether it's a high school bully or some guy that cut you off in traffic, we've all had a little taste of seeking justice by our own hands for a perceived wrong. The exploration of this theme isn't just limited to the entertainment world. Some psychologists and philosophers have also expressed their views on the subject in their different bodies of work. Today, the show we'll be using to explore this topic of seeking revenge and the price that can come with it is going to be Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga has made its way to being one of my favorites of the recent anime that we've had over the last 5 years. The anime is set in 11th century Europe and depicts the era of Viking dominance, where they went around pillaging and conquering different cities and countries. I was particularly drawn in by the rich storytelling of the show, the different complex characters, and following the journey of a young boy dealing with trauma and fantasies of revenge. Today we'll be looking at the life of this young boy, the protagonist of the show, Thorfinn. We'll be focusing on only the first season of the show and exploring how Thorfinn's journey for revenge affected his development as a character throughout the season. We'll be exploring concepts related to the pursuit of revenge from psychology, such as the concept of the shadow from Carl Jung, along with some philosophical themes like the will to power by Nietzsche, and Kant's view on the morality behind pursuing revenge. Revenge is the main narrative in Vinland Saga. We see the Danes seeking revenge on the British for ambushing them at the river. You have the British wanting revenge on the Vikings for pillaging their villages. And you have Thorfinn wanting revenge for the unjust killing of his father. Ever since Thorfinn was a child, he always had that spirit in him that all Viking children had. That spirit that desires to go to war, to explore and vanquish enemies. But his dad Thor's was very different from when we began following him. He didn't believe anyone had enemies and was one of the most wholesome, badass characters I've seen in any anime. He was the ideal pacifist. A good example that highlights the type of man Thor was when he sacrificed 8 of his sheep to free a slave who was on the brink of death and died the next day. And those were the sheep that were supposed to keep his family through the winter. He also believed that a true warrior does not need a sword. Thorfinn, on the other hand, didn't seem taken with these pacifist ideologies of his father. He was a rambunctious young child, and I swear that's the first time I've ever used that word. He was very energetic and seemed to be stronger than even kids older than him, going as far as sending them to get first aid treatment whenever they had their play fights. It seems like he inherited that strength that his father possessed, but he also seemed to have a lot of rage inside him. After sneaking onto the ship that his father was taking to meet the young Vikings to assist them in war, he witnessed his father get ambushed and killed by the pirate Askeladd. Seeing this broke Thorfinn. He became enraged. Even as he sat in the boat that the pirate stole by himself, you could see the rage in his eyes. This began his quest for revenge. This rage and the quest for revenge that we see Thorfinn embark on could be seen as a manifestation of what Carl Jung called the shadow, a representation of his repressed anger and resentment. But as much as Thorfinn wanted to avenge his father, I don't think he had it in him to actually get the revenge he claimed he was looking for. He wanted Askeladd's life for the life of his father, but he didn't want it to be done in what he believed was the wrong way. Thorfinn had the opportunity to kill Askeladd in his sleep, but chose not to, and instead challenged him to a duel. This could be seen as the honorable way of getting what he wanted, and this battle between getting revenge by any means necessary and doing it the honorable way is sort of Thorfinn's attempt at fighting with his shadow. These darker, vengeful aspects of his personality that emerged following his father's death are at odds with his conscious values. And besides the psychological state he was in, he seemed to also be taking a Kantian approach to his revenge. The philosopher Immanuel Kant believed that even in the pursuit of justice for a perceived wrong, it is important to adhere to moral principles. He argued that when revenge is motivated by emotions and passions, it can lead to moral transgressions, which in the case of Thorfinn would be killing a man from behind while he was asleep. He at least had that frame of ethical conduct despite his rage, and this gave me some hope for him as a character. The next morning, Thorfinn challenged Askeladd to a duel in his quest for retribution against the pirates. After losing this duel, we see him famished. He hasn't eaten anything since he followed the pirates after the death of his father. And despite this, when he's offered their leftovers, he rejects it, only to go back to the camp to try getting whatever scrap from their remains that he could, but to no avail. This pride of his is a recurring theme, and one could even argue that it wasn't just out of moral obligation that he didn't kill Askeladd when he thought that he was asleep, but out of pride. He wanted to beat the man that killed his father in a way that he would be proud of both as an individual and as a Viking. But while we could argue that his quest for revenge didn't make him lose his morals, it did affect him in other ways. And this brings us to what I think is a core philosophical theme throughout the series, which is Nietzsche's idea of the will to power. The will to power is a concept Nietzsche talked about in a lot of his work, which argues that human beings are driven by the desire to exert and expand their power and influence, rather than by the pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. The will to power manifests in various ways, from the pursuit of personal ambitions and overcoming obstacles to the exertion of influence over others, maybe in the form of pursuing revenge. He believed that the will to power also has individual implications, influencing personal development, psychological health, and one's worldview. I think in Thorfinn's case, him witnessing the death of his father and being unable to do anything about it triggered a sense of powerlessness in him, and his psychological immune system did not default to drinking or any other acts of pleasure seeking. It went to revenge, an act that would put power back in his hands. And towards the end of the season, we see that whenever this desire is questioned, he gets very defensive about it, almost like his sanity was depending on it. After the first duel Thorfinn had with Askeladd, the second time he tried to duel him, Askeladd told him he would only honor the duel if he was able to kill someone in battle. And Thorfinn did. He brutally killed one of the soldiers and was entitled to the duel, which he obviously lost again. See, while Thorfinn's will to power was helping him gain more agency in terms of acquiring strength, it also led him to a point where he was beginning to lose himself and his autonomy. After killing someone, it's very difficult to go back to how you were. And after Thorfinn's first kill, he screamed out, and we could see something had changed or began to change in him psychologically. And Askeladd, who is one of, if not the most intelligent character in the entire anime, said something once, which was that everybody is a slave to something. For some people it's money, for others it's women. Thorfinn was a slave to his quest for revenge, what he might have seen as justice, what Nietzsche would have called power. And Askeladd knew this and made sure to use it to his advantage. Thorfinn would fulfill Askeladd's outrageous demands in exchange for a chance at dueling him, and even went as far as fighting Thorkel, a freaking 8-foot giant that was throwing boulders across the river for fun. Thorfinn's pursuit for revenge was costing him his freedom without him realizing it. He had become a puppet, a sword that Askeladd could call on whenever he wanted, and he would obey as long as he agreed to a duel with him, which he would always lose. Thorfinn was basically helping the man that killed his father further his own plans and ambitions. And as much as Thorfinn tried to be level-headed with his revenge, he was always prone to becoming emotional whenever he was taunted or his father's name was mentioned. He had the opportunity to almost finish Askeladd, but all Askeladd had to do was make fun of his late father and he would lose control. He became blinded and wasn't thinking clearly. This is the price he's paying for holding on to his revenge fantasy. He loses on all fronts, and you even see him eventually get almost depressed about this realization when Askeladd points it out to him. He helps Askeladd with his mission. He doesn't kill him in an ambush because it's dishonorable and would wound his pride, so he wants to put his emotions aside and duel him. But he can't win a duel because Askeladd knows how to make him emotional in the fight and lose. And as pathetic as this sounds, I think it actually gives me hope for Thorfinn as a character. He was on what some of the philosophers we've spoken about would consider the good kind of revenge. Unlike Askeladd, who made his way into his estranged father's house, gained the trust of the royal court and his family, waited till he secured his will and inheritance, then killed his father for what he did to his mother, and framed his brother, who as far as we know did absolutely nothing to him. According to Kant, Askeladd committed some moral transgressions and did not conduct himself ethically at all. And we could see Askeladd only continued with his immoral and selfish ways till he met his demise. We can look into Askeladd, who I think is one of the most interesting characters, along with Canute, in another video. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see that. But Thorfinn became a warrior, fought people head on and bested them in combat. Yes, he was being manipulated by Askeladd, but he never was deceptive to anyone, and as far as the Viking code goes, he acted honorably. According to Nietzsche, we can see Askeladd's revenge being classified as noble revenge, or revenge born out of master or noble morality. which is one that arose from a position of strength and self-assuredness. He believed in himself and his strength, and while Kant might have considered his approach to be unethical, Nietzsche didn't look at it from right or wrong or good and evil, but the will to power. And in noble revenge, it is done to affirm oneself and assert one's value in the world. It doesn't seek to merely destroy the other, but to elevate oneself in the process, which Askeladd made sure he did. Whereas Thorfinn would have been classified as resentful revenge, which is born out of slave morality. It arises from a place of weakness, powerlessness, and a sense of being wronged. It is characterized by a desire to tear down or harm the perceived wrongdoer, often without a clear sense of self or purpose. This is further evidenced after Askeladd dies, and we see Thorfinn so lost, not knowing what to do with himself anymore. This thirst for revenge he held onto so strongly caused him to work for a man he claimed to hate, abandon his sister and mother, and basically lose himself. At this point he was nothing in terms of personality besides Askeladd's sword. And while Askeladd was dying, he asked Thorfinn, "How do you plan to live your life after I die?" And I think Thorfinn's demeanor after this question is an indication of that realization sinking in. Askeladd says that he hadn't thought about it, had he? He tells him that he should move forward already, that his real fight is to go beyond where Thor's went and become a true warrior. Askeladd had a full plan in his mind for killing his father, getting the inheritance, and pinning the murder on someone else. Master morality. Thorfinn wanted to kill Askeladd in a duel, but had no plans of what to do after he achieved that, which begs the question whether he even wanted to kill him in the first place or not, because he knew deep down he would be lost. Slave morality. The question I had in my mind, and maybe some of you did too after the last scene of season 1, was what path is Thorfinn going to go down now? Despite the final words of Askeladd to Thorfinn still lashed out at Canute, slashing him across the eye. He still resisted being taken away, with a look of denial in his eyes at the sight of Askeladd's dead body. Does this mean that he will continue to be obsessed with revenge and maybe transfer it to someone else like Canute for robbing him of his perceived justice? Or will he be able to move forward and become a true warrior as Askeladd advised in his dying breath? I believe the latter is more likely for Thorfinn, just because of the glimpses we have seen into his moments of epiphany through the season. We had the scene with the woman that saved him in the village, who reminded him of his mother, and we saw the look in her eyes when she saw him for the monster that the soldier described him as. She looked almost sad and disappointed. Maybe that's why she reminded him of his mother. We also had the scene with Leif, where he tried getting him to come back. And after Askeladd beat him the last time, and he was still trying to fight and swearing that he'll kill him, Askeladd said he was like a dog hounding for scraps, and all he had to do was put on a little show and he had him going, and that he was really useful. You see some glimpse of realization in Thorfinn's eyes, and almost an immediate denial of what was just said to him. And after he recovered from being knocked out, we see him reminiscing on the years of being used and crying out in agony for everything that he had been through. And lastly, like we mentioned earlier, when Askeladd asked him what he would do with his life after he dies, we see a glimpse of this realization again. If Thorfinn was completely possessed by the spirit of revenge, I think those expressions would have been more masked or even non-existent. So I believe that the thing that he kept gravitating towards, which was Askeladd and his desire to beat him in a duel, has been eliminated. We might see him come to terms with this reality of the things that he has done over the years, and he might realize that has not been a fulfilling way to live, as it has only yielded him nothing in his life so far beyond being a skillful warrior. He might even begin to adopt or have a Canute-like epiphany where he realizes how pointless these fights, wars and killing is. He has always been an impressive fighter and acknowledged by many, including Thorkel, but it was mostly his body he had been training. His mind was still weak. So I think this is the next stage of his character development. I'm yet to watch the second season of the show, so I'm excited to see what might happen to Thorfinn moving forward. And I'm not a writer or anything, so I might be completely off with my predictions, but I'm sure it would be interesting to see, as so far I have been very impressed with the writing of this show. Thanks so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts in the comments if there were any philosophically relevant moments in Thorfinn's pursuit for revenge you think I missed, or that you found interesting, and I'll see you in the next video.